Welcome everyone. I will hand over this session to Ms. Jane Jerry to take us through as we start. I think Mr. Professor Dumbo is not yet here. Okay, I will ask Dr. Dotun to welcome everyone as we wait for Jane to be back. Doc.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
Once again, we are very happy to have you around. As usual, this is OLDN. This is a forum that is created to support leadership and development in organization, and then right from individual point of view, from the use of self to how we can affect our family, community, corporate organizations, and the larger society as well. Today, we are having a very resounding interaction, which we think is going to hinge on how we can affect our businesses. In particular, as we look at the happenings in the last, now going to almost 9 months now, since the novel team took over the world by surprise. We've seen quite a number of happenings and effects on the social, psychological, and corporate impact, right from the local communities and local organizations to global organizations. We've seen quite a number of them expressing transitioning, experiencing a lot of changes, while some are making it, some are actually falling. And as a result of this, at OLDN, we are quite aware of the impact all these happenings are having on individual, community, family, corporations, and the globe. And as a result of that, we think it will be necessary to see how do we reemerge or realign as leaders in these current experiences. And that's why today we are having seasoned experts, which have been taking us through how we can navigate and how we can come out strong as we gradually wind down the year 2020, so that we could have better impact, as I mentioned, in our individual lives, in our communities, in our families, in our businesses, and in the globe as well. So once again, you are welcome to OLDN from every part of the world: Africa, Asia, Pacific, Middle East, American, Europe, and wherever you are coming from. We are so hopeful and believing that today's conversation will not just only be igniting, but will be impactful to you, either as a member or as an invitee. And we are hoping that as they take us through the phases, we'll be able to ask questions, we'll be able to interact with the faculties, and we'll be able to have a lot of things to learn and to take away. Once again, it's a pleasure to have you here. And today we shall be having two distinguished experts who shall be taking us through critical impacts and thematics that will affect us all in our world. We'll be having an expert from Mrs. Maureen Omeibe, an executive director of the Gap Group, Nigeria, as well as Sasha, Farley, an expert in OLD, leadership, and development. Thank you, Dr. Justin. Over to you.
Okay, Jane, are you okay now?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, it's okay now.
Okay, just one moment. So depending on the location, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome. I think Dr. Dotun has mentioned the welcome, but I'll still do that. Welcome to Organization Leadership Development Network Membership Conversations, a community that strives to ignite insightful conversations with the main purpose of enhancing the different professions or bodies that we all represent. My name is Jane Jerry, and before I hand over to the moderator of today, I will take only 2 minutes or less to give a brief preview of Organization Leadership and Development Network. I'll start by apologizing. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation as it was last minute. However, that will not stop us today in today's agenda. So Organization Leadership and Development Network is a subsidiary of Center for Organization Leadership and Development, commonly known as COLD, which exists to make a difference in the society by striving to move individuals, work teams, and even the organization itself up the ladder of growth through education, training. You can name all of that. Organization Leadership and Development Network, which we call it OLDN, exists to facilitate insights and practice in OD through provision of a platform for information exchange like the one we're having today, informed publications, debate forums, and a network for existing and emerging OD professions. As a network that strives to ignite insightful conversation, there are numerous events lined up with great speakers like this one you're having today. I hope you're all excited to learn. As mentioned earlier, Organization Leadership and Development Network has members from different professions, and as such, there are 7 segments identified from banking, HR, law, and security. Needless to mention that students, I be one of them, we also benefit from the 7 segments. I describe Organization Leadership and Development Network as a community where mediocrity is shunned and members strive to be authentic in every aspect of their lives. I cannot emphasize much on that. I think Dr. Justine has already mentioned about that over a number of times. And from a personal level, which I believe is the case for all members, I have experienced growth and change from both my social and professional life. As an emerging OD profession, joining Organization Leadership and Development Network is one of the best decisions I made in 2020. So without further ado, allow me to pass on this virtual mic to Ms. Fozia, our moderator for today, who will introduce herself and start today's conversations. Ms. Fozia was working as a key accounts manager here in Dubai, and now she's back in Morocco. Once more, welcome all, and thank you so much for joining us today. Ms. Fozia.
Well, hello and good morning and good evening, good afternoon for everybody. So as my friend, she said, we are a member of OLDN, the organization and leadership and development as well. So welcome, and we are really happy to have you here ourselves. And please, if anybody have any question, just write it down when it comes up with you, if you have any questions. And I hope we all have love this organization, as I am sorry. So
Yes, I think we have a glitch there. We have other members who are on Facebook and they are viewing us live on Facebook. I see Mr. Emmanuel is commenting on Facebook. We welcome you. We are with you on this particular program. Okay, so I think we'll start with Miss Sasha since Prof is not yet here.
Let me just share my screen. Okay, can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you guys very much for inviting me here today. Before I dive into what I wanted to talk about, I wanted to share a little bit about why I chose this topic. Over the past 2 years, I was part of a team that conducted research into the values for organization development. And this research looked at our values from a future-oriented perspective. So as a lot of us know, right, organization development is a field that is values-based, where practitioners seek to embody and demonstrate our values in the work that we do with our clients. So in addition, one of the 9 core OD values that we identified in this research was client growth and development, which really highlighted that one of our goals is to help organizations develop the capacity to continue to better themselves, even in the absence of an OD practitioner's presence. Now, this idea got some attention and discussion occurred around whether our OD values were values that we should be helping organizations aspire to. The answer to that is no, as our values might not fit right with all organizations. However, as I thought more on the topic, I realized that the values of diversity and collaborative engagement that arose from this study have been proven to be beneficial to organizations and to help them actually achieve their business and mission goals. The impact of collaborative engagement and diversity has on organizations are especially helpful supporting innovation and adapting to change, which I would argue is pretty crucial given COVID and definitely our fast-changing world. So I wanted to focus on these 2 values today to outline the concrete benefits that they can bring to organizations and how we can help organizations integrate these practices so that they can achieve the full benefits that they provide. So first, let's start with what is collaboration? So by definition, collaboration is 2 or more people working together towards a shared goal. With this definition being so straightforward and simple, why is it something that is so hard to do effectively? Why is collaboration, it's not a new concept. It's been in the literature and businesses have been talking about it for a long time. So why are we still seeing organizations striving to be collaborative environments? And that's because effective collaboration is not as straightforward as the definition implies, and it requires diversity of people and opinions, as well as structures and processes that create inclusive environments. So why should organizations care enough about collaboration to integrate it and potentially change the way that they do their business? Well, numerous studies and research have shown a number of concrete benefits that organizations get with effective collaboration. These include improved flexibility and productivity, accelerated business velocity, and increased profitability. They have more engaged employees with higher retention rates, and the generation of new ideas and solutions to adapt to changing environments. So specifically, you see that 33% of employees say that the ability to collaborate makes them more loyal to their company. And companies with higher than average diversity had 90% higher innovation revenues. And workplace collaboration can increase success of innovation by 15%. Now, these are not trivial numbers when we are talking about businesses in increasingly competitive marketplaces, or if we're talking about government institutions that are striving to innovate on how they achieve their missions in supporting the public in a constantly changing world. Now, that's at the organizational level. If you zoom into the team and project level, you can see additional benefits of effective collaboration as well. You see better decision-making ability, you see greater understanding of the impacts, both intentional or unintentional decisions that they make. You create built-in champions throughout the company, and you increase success of projects and commitment to achieving results. And studies have shown that diverse teams make better decisions up to 87% of the time. They also show that 86% of employees and executives cite a lack of collaboration or ineffective communication for failures on work tasks. And employees who acted collaboratively stuck at their tasks 64% longer than their solitary peers, and they reported higher engagement levels, lower fatigue levels, and higher success rates. Now multiply this impact across multiple projects across an entire organization, and you can clearly start to see the impact of effective collaboration. It's really untold on how it can help organizations achieve their business goals and help them achieve their mission impacts. So given all of that, what does effective collaboration look like, given that we know many organizations are still struggling with this? So to level set, before we dive in, collaboration occurs at all levels. Collaboration, as described in the definition, is two or more people. So theoretically, when you're talking to someone on Skype, asking them a question about a task, do you have information on why, you are collaborating in that moment. It's the same thing as when you're emailing, Skyping, in meetings. And then there are also common examples of core structures that organizations are more and more striving to establish that create collaboration points. This is what we hear when we talk about collaborative teams, workshops, working groups, community practice, centers of excellence. Definitely things that the OD practitioners and leaders are definitely interested in this day and age. So given all of this, and that I'm talking about multiple levels of organizations and multiple levels of collaboration through the rest of these slides, what does effective collaboration actually look like that allows organizations to achieve the results? So effective collaboration actually requires developing trust, respect, and empathy. It also requires a willingness to explore others' ideas and experiment with those ideas. It also takes a lot of time and energy to achieve results. And you also need to include diverse perspectives to be able to gain the new and unexpected outcomes. However, in fact, if you look at a lot of these, many argue that typical business environments of the past, with their politics and ingrained competition, actually create spaces that prevent collaboration instead of supporting it. Therefore, in order to incorporate effective collaboration in organizations, the organizations need to change their mindset to one that facilitates and fosters effective collaboration. And that's why, arguably, a lot of them fail, because they aren't fostering this mindset. What I mean by collaboration mindset is this. As I mentioned earlier, collaboration requires people to be open to others' ideas, let go of personal agendas, and work towards a common goal. There are psychological skills that are required to effectively have this mindset, and frequently employees and organizations are accidentally trained not to think and behave this way through traditional training and development models. So to support collaboration, employees should be provided the time and training to learn, practice, and use these skills and how they interact with each other to really create an organization that is keyed up and ready to effectively collaborate. Now, what are these skills that I'm talking about? What I'm talking about is developing the capacity to listen without talking. And by this, I mean, how many times have you been in a conversation where you're listening to what somebody else is saying until you have an idea or it sparks an idea in you? And then majority of us at that point will switch and start listening for the pause in the conversation where you can then contribute your idea to the group. What happens when you do this is you actually stop listening in that moment to the rest of the point that the other person is trying to convey, and it can actually decrease the amount of collaborative communication that can occur. So it's really important to teach people to pause, fully listen, and fully be focused on what other people are saying without thinking about what you want to contribute in that moment. It's also important to practice and support people in demonstrating empathy and learning how to be empathetic. In collaboration, you have diverse groups of people who are all coming together to share ideas. And a lot of those ideas might seem crazy or out of the box, but that's the point of collaboration. And without being able to take the time and be empathetic and think about things from other people's perspectives, a lot of the time these new and innovative ideas are not given the focused energy that they require to be bought into and then developed into something for the organization to use and leverage to better position themselves within the marketplace. You also need to increase the comfort with feedback. So Collaboration is all about people working together, and it's not going to work right all the time. There's going to be conflicts both at the individual, at the group, and at the topic level, which ideas you're going to pursue. And being able to have a conversation, to be comfortable providing feedback on what works and what doesn't work, and understanding and not taking these sort of feedback personally really helps develop the ability to work together within the organization and helps you better collaborate. It's also important to build the ability to lead and to follow. Traditionally, companies will have leadership development practices that teach people how to make better decisions, how to better delegate, and how to do a lot of other very leading activities without also teaching leaders how to follow. You can see this in some of the new ideas that are coming out about servant leadership, right? It's important to be able to recognize that you might not always be the one who has the best ideas. And when somebody else comes up and is able to be in a collaborative effort and is able to be sharing something that would be beneficial to the overall goal you were trying to achieve, it's important to be able to step back and to follow and allow them to pursue that idea and support them in that. It's also very important to speak with clarity and avoid abstractions. So whenever you collaborate and work with people, and you're working with people with different perspectives, you're going to be talking about the same thing, but from very different viewpoints. And so if you speak with too much jargon or you speak in like abstract concepts without concrete terms to help, you can sometimes be speaking past each other and missing the nuances and missing the overlaps that you guys have and how your ideas are building on top of each other. So it's important to train the people in your organization to speak clearly and to avoid jargon and distraction. And then the last thing is to train people to have win-win interactions. And by this, I know win-win is actually a jargon term, which I find funny, but win-win is not about compromise. It is about sharing ideas and information clearly enough to identify the core needs of all parties and find the best way to deliver on those needs. When you actually are able to clearly describe what your actual needs are, you will recognize that many times there's a lot more different parties' needs are actually more complementary than they are contradictory. And building this sort of capacity will help. And also building all the other things that we talked about listening without talking, speaking with clarity, will also help you identify what those win-win interactions are. So, given all of that, one thing that I really want to focus on that I don't think is given enough attention when we talk about collaboration, the benefits that collaboration has for an organization, is talking about when to use collaboration. Not everything actually requires collaboration to be successful, and overuse of collaboration can actually lead to collaboration fatigue and burnout. So a recent study said that employees now spend 50% more time engaged in collaborative work, resulting in up to 80% of employees' time spent collaborating. And this is talking about when you're Skype messaging someone, when you're emailing, time spent in meetings, time spent in these collaborative working sessions, and this adds up. Collaboration is not the most effective tool to use in all circumstances. In fact, what you see a lot in organizations these days is collaboration is often used to cover up gaps in other processes within the organization. A common example of this is to cover up gaps in effective knowledge management. You see collaboration being used as a cover when you see that groups that frequently message each other asking questions such as, can you send me the results from the last customer experience survey? Or what were the action items that I had to do from the last staff meeting? When you see these slight interaction points that people are asking, at the surface, they seem like, oh, people are collaborating and sharing knowledge. But what's really happening is these little collaboration points that can be covered with other processes and structures are actually add up to create a substantial strain on employees' time, which takes away time that employees need to actually focus on executing tasks, which will end up leading to negative impacts on the business's bottom lines instead of actually the beneficial impacts that businesses are striving for. Now, collaboration does have clear benefits, as I talked about, right? But it's only when it's applied to relevant problems and situations. So what are those relevant problems and situations? Here are just a couple examples, but essentially, when you want to generate ideas or products, if you're planning something that is extremely complex, if you're addressing something unique or a risky topic, if you're making major decisions that will affect many people, and like if you're trying to improve quality or efficiency, these are easy examples for when collaboration will be worth the effort. But overall, one thing that I wanted to share was there are three main characteristics that will tell you if collaboration is worth the time and energy that it requires. First, if you're working on something that has no clear solution, collaboration will likely help you identify a better solution than working on your own. If you're working with something that requires complex processes or structures to get underway or even to find the solution, collaboration will also help you get better results. And if you're working on something that requires collective information gathering, so essentially gathering information from a bunch of different people and or will require a bunch of different people working together to implement or execute whatever the solution is at the end, that is also a great time to use collaboration. Using these three characteristics will help you both look at what you're currently doing to understand if you are accidentally using collaboration to cover gaps in additional processes within the organization, and also to help you think about when new situations or topics arise, whether a collaborative engagement approach will be effective. So say you've established and you decided that, yes, I have this idea and I know that collaboration is going to be the most effective way for me to achieve results. Now it's time to think about the basic building blocks of effective collaboration. And these basic building blocks are very simple, very straightforward. I'm sure they look familiar to people, but these actually are the foundation of collaboration regardless of the size, whether you're working with 2 people or you're working with an entire organization to achieve this. Focusing attention on these 3 elements will not only help you design effective collaboration to begin with, but it will also help you identify weak points in current collaborative structures. So these 3 basic building blocks include, you should always start by building trust and connection. For collaboration to be effective, people need to feel a sense of psychological safety in order to take risks to share ideas openly. In collaboration, you're asking people to open themselves up, share their ideas, and be vulnerable sometimes by potentially sharing ideas that are counter to what the organization is currently doing. And in order to get these sort of innovative and new ideas and approaches, you need to make sure that everyone in the process feels safe and comfortable sharing that information. You also need to ensure that you have clearly defined the goal of that collaboration. Without a clear goal, you have energies of all these people coming together, but they're not clearly focused. And what this tends to look like is if you're in a workshop where people ask for participants to do some sort of activity and people aren't really understanding what they're trying to get out of it. You'll get these questions a lot sometimes, but sometimes you'll see the group sort of meandering about. That's usually a sign that there is not clear goals of what they're trying to accomplish. And clear goals are important for the overall collaboration, but also each step within the collaboration process as well. People need something to focus their energies around. And then it's also important to clarify their roles. Individuals need to have a basic understanding of how they fit into the group in order to fully engage. Basically, this is not to necessarily say, go down to the detail of you're going to be the note taker in this session and you're going to be the facilitator in this session, although sometimes that will be helpful. It's also just to understand why they're in the room in the first place, what perspectives you brought them in there for, why they were involved in this conversation to begin with. Now, what this looks like in practice is I'm going to use what is the most commonly used collaborative tool. It is also a very effective collaborative tool, meetings. I'm also going to say that we all know that meetings, I think, are the most commonly misused collaboration tool in existence in businesses. When you're looking at meetings, you can apply these 3 building blocks, and I know we all will be able to see the effects of this through our experiences with various meetings. Basically, the questions you need to ask yourself is, like, in these meetings, do the people in the meeting know each other already and already have connections? If they don't, have you built in time to introduce them to each other so that they can build these connections? Or are we just diving right into the work? Do the meetings have clear goals? And this is for each meeting and the meeting series as a whole, if it's a series of meetings that you're doing. And do all the people invited have a clear role to play? A lot of times in collaborative sessions, people will invite, especially in meetings, people will steer on the side of inviting more is better, which is not always true if each person doesn't have a role to play in that conversation. And if everyone does have a role to play, are they aware of what role you're expecting them to play in that? If any of these basic building blocks are missing from the collaboration, they will not be effective, and you are going to not be effectively using people's time and energy and actually going against what the goal is of collaboration. So now that you know the basic building blocks on how to design and review collaboration, let's move to what the leader's role is in this. So this topic, OLDN, right, is leadership and development. We all know that leaders have crucial roles in organizations in their ability to impact and have success. And leaders definitely have a very crucial role, regardless of how hierarchical or non-hierarchical your organization is, in the success of collaboration, both at the team level, if we're talking about a manager, or at the organizational level. If collaboration is to be successful, the collaboration mindset that I overviewed earlier needs to be publicly demonstrated by the leaders. Some specific ways that leaders can do this is by building relationships across their organization or group. And by this, I mean not just building relationships within the leadership team or the managerial team, but also building relationships up and down within the organization as well. This shows the understanding that different perspectives are important and that relationships are important throughout. It's also, as we talked about, good to model the collaborative behavior and how they work with teams. I'm not sure how many leaders you guys have seen where they'll say, oh, collaboration is very important, everyone's perspective is important, and we value everyone's perspective, and yet you always see them doing tasks alone, or they don't take feedback from others into better suggestions for how to do things. So they're not modeling the behavior that they're saying. And that can be very detrimental to any sort of efforts to really include collaboration to get the benefits from it in a business setting. It's also important to integrate informal mentoring into day-to-day interactions. What this looks like is on-the-spot coaching and immediate feedback within the relationships that the leader has already been developing when they're building the community. There's a lot of research that shows that this on-the-spot coaching and immediate feedback is more beneficial at developing and fostering collaboration than mentoring in a more structured process. And this is not to say that mentoring in a structured process is bad. There are definitely benefits that come from that. When we're speaking from a mainly collaboration perspective, the integrating it into day-to-day practices is really what kind of helps foster that collaboration mindset within the organization. And then lastly, as leaders, it's important to take both a task and a relationship-oriented approach. I know that there's a lot of research out there on managerial stuff and what's the best way for leaders and approaches for leaders to take. But when we're looking at this from a collaboration standpoint, both elements are important for different pieces of the puzzle. So task orientation, right, is about the ability to make objectives clear and create shared awareness of tasks. This is especially important when we talk about creating clear goals and identifying clear roles for people within the process. And relationship orientation is about developing an environment of trust and goodwill. As we talked about, that's the foundation of any collaborative effort, is being able to create that trusting and safe space. So as leaders, it's important to recognize both of these and recognize when to use both of the approaches as you're helping facilitate collaboration, when it's time to deal with the relationships and build that deeper, and when it's time to create the clarity needed to create the space and hold the shell for collaboration to occur. And when you do this effectively, 54% of employees say that a strong sense of community is what kept them at a company longer than what was in their best interest. And that's pretty impactful if you think about it. More than half of employees say if there's a strong sense of community, they're going to stay at a company, regardless of other factors are telling them that they shouldn't and that there's a better place for them to be. That means community is a really great driving factor, and community is the bedrock of collaboration within an organization. Now, I'm going to shift a little bit, but we talked about what effective collaboration looks like and some things you can focus on to help build the capacity within your organization. But if you remember at the start of one of the key elements of effective collaboration is inclusion of diverse perspectives. These diverse perspectives are what allows collaboration to identify new and innovative ideas and solutions, which is arguably the greatest benefit and makes it worth the increased time and energy it takes to collaborate. So the question of who should be included in collaborative efforts is a crucial question that should be given focused and targeted energy. So Covey famously said, I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard this, that strength lies in differences, not in similarities. Collaboration cannot yield innovative, new, or unexpected results if the participants are the same people who always participate in the discussion and decision-making. Collaboration delivers its true impact and is most effective when participants are diverse. And this is whether it's at the team level or at organizational-wide communities of practice. This is why diversity and inclusion go hand in hand with effective collaboration in organizations. Now, when we talk about diversity in the workplace, there's many different ways that you can break down diversity traits. For the purposes of this discussion, I'm going to break them down into two different groups: inherent diversity and acquired diversity. And both of these are important to understand, and it's important to give equal emphasis to both of them when you're striving to create diverse participants in collaborative exercises. So inherent diversity traits. By this, I mean these are traits that you are born with. And examples of them are race, gender, age, disability, sexual orientation, religion, the ones that we think about the most when we think about diversity. And collaborative teams should include diverse groups of people across these inherent traits. But there's a lot of people who do a lot of research on this, and I'm sure you guys have already heard, so I want to focus more on acquired diversity traits. Acquired diversity traits includes traits you gain from experience. And ensuring diversity across these sort of traits is what will ensure all the relevant organization-specific knowledge is available during collaboration. Essentially, when we talk about acquired traits, we're talking about geographic distribution. What this looks like is in a multinational corporation, if you have an employee who has worked in multiple countries, they're going to have a different perspective of the overall organization and its runnings. And if you involve them in the decisions and discussions, you'll get much richer breadth of understanding and be able to identify better solutions. We're talking about fields of expertise. If you're talking just about trying to figure out a technological problem, it might still be worth bringing in people who know more about the chemical engineering versus the tech if it's relevant, because they can provide the much richer discussion to be able to fully understand the impacts of different decisions. Amount of experience, level within the company, and role are also very important elements to talk about as well. When you're talking about decisions that are going to be affecting large portions of the organization, it's important to have have a voice of everyone who's going to be impacted in order to understand the impacts that it's going to have on them. And doing this will allow you to get that boost in effective decision-making that I mentioned earlier in some of the statistics. Understanding and getting people from all levels of the company, both the frontline worker and the leadership, in the same room to have discussions is where you're really going to see a lot of impact and outcomes. And I can speak to this from some experiences that I had with a large nonprofit in which we were working to address some of their financial processes and help improve the process in which they did it in documentation and increase knowledge sharing. In the process of how we created and addressed this difficulty, we brought everyone into the room, every single person involved in that process, from the person who opened the mail all the way up to the chief financial officer. We're all brought in together and we facilitated a conversation in which they were able to share their perspectives, address the problems and challenges together. And what you see is this opening up of ideas and perspectives. And you could see the CFO starting to understand some of the intricacies of what was happening, why some of the delays were occurring. And collectively, they were able to identify points in which they could streamline or change the processes. Who can get better access to systems that historically were confined to the financial side of the organization in order to speed up the process of documenting incoming information. And so you really can see this when you open it up and broaden the people who are participating in the interactions. Now, inclusion of both inherent and acquired diversity is considered a two-dimensional diversity. And there's been research that shows that companies with two-dimensional diversity are 45% more likely to report that they had captured a larger portion of the market and 70% more likely to have entered into a new market in the past year. And I would argue in this day and age with how competitive it is, that's a pretty influential decision point. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is this. Diversity on its own is important, but having inclusive structures and processes is crucial for collaboration to be able to leverage these diverse perspectives. And without that, the organizations and businesses are not going to be able to leverage effective collaboration and then leverage the diverse perspectives to get the success that they want. So with diverse participants, collaboration approaches need to account for the diversity in opinions, norms, and cultures as well. And the best way to help create inclusive collaboration is to understand the participants and their accessibility requirements before designing collaboration structures and activities. And by this, I mean, in this day and age, if you want to include frontline workers and you have to do this as a virtual collaboration exercise, do they have access to laptops with video capabilities in them? If not, how are you going to get them access to the technology they need to be able to actively participate in any session? If you're dealing with people in person, hopefully after COVID is done, right? And you're dealing with someone who's in a wheelchair, is the room that you are planning to use only accessible through stairs? Will they have a hard time getting there? When you're thinking about this sort of inclusive collaborative structures, it's important to recognize that you want to create everyone to have the safe psychological space in which they don't have distractions that others in the room do not have, that will just take away from the energy that they could commit to the activity. The idea is to make everyone's access and ability to join the same so that everyone can actively participate and focus on the exercises that you have planned. And as we stated before, the core bedrock of any collaborative effort is building connections and creating trust. When you're working with diverse people, this will take more time, but it's also more important than it might be if you're working with people who have worked together continually before. And it's important not to skip this step, as the benefit of why you're inviting diverse people who may not interact on a daily basis is because they can share conflicting ideas and opinions, and you need to be able to create a space where everyone feels like they are at the same level, that everyone is able to share information equally, and that no one's information is going to be held against them. And the very last thing that you want to focus on when you have trying to create inclusive collaboration is when you invite diverse groups of people to participate, you also need to recognize that there will be diverse participation preferences and comfort as well. For instance, not everyone will feel comfortable speaking up in a large group, but that same person may be very willing to provide input and thoughts in writing through a sticky note exercise or a chat box sort activity if you're using it in a virtual environment. So it's really important to incorporate multiple avenues of engagement, including conversational elements, which is like small group discussions or anything else like that, in non-conversational elements with polls, chat boxes, sticky notes, all of those other things that require individual time writing things down. This will allow for full engagement across all of your diverse participants and increase comfort levels with people sharing in whatever way they feel most comfortable sharing. And why would you do all of this? I want to leave you with this. So inclusive companies have 2.3 times higher cash flow per employee and are 1.8 times more likely to be change ready, which is crucial in the COVID environment, and especially what's probably going to be the environment once we're all out of COVID. And they are 1.7 times more innovative in the marketplace. So these will, and being inclusive really helps you fully leverage diversity, which is important and crucial to fully leverage collaboration. It's like a building structure. And with that, I am done. Are there any questions?
Actually, thank you so much, Ms. Sasha. Really, I wish all the organization have a person like you. Really, it's an impressive presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, quick questions, comments before I chip in. Thank you so much, Sasha. As you were presenting, I was chatting with Dr. Dotun to say, you know, this is something that is more practical and relevant to today. I see he's joining again. And he said his notebook is full and mine is full as well, as I was jotting down every other point that you mentioned. And fundamental question that probably I will ask Maureen to respond as an executive director is the question you posed when you started to say, though most organizational leaders appreciate collaboration and inclusivity, it's not being practiced. So probably Maureen will help us on that. Why is that happening? And Funbi as well. Why is that happening from a practical point of view? Because I think every CEO or leader appreciates collaboration and inclusion. Maureen.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Justin. Sasha, you did very wonderful. And I wasn't expecting to see this volume of information in this presentation. I've learned so much. And I'm going to request that I'm giving your slides at the end of this conversation. You did very well. There's a whole lot for us to learn from what you have just presented. Dr. Justin, first and foremost, let me appreciate you and the next of the leadership of OLDN for expanding the knowledge economy of the African continent through these conversations and through this network. What we are doing, this bit by bit conversation every single day is making a whole lot of impact, and we will begin to count the impact as soon as we put everything together. Now, to answer your question, the bottom line is that when it comes to understanding and appreciating what is good to practice in business organizations, it is very, very convenient. It's very, very easy for us to say we appreciate it, we understand it, we believe in it. Where the problem lies has always been the practice, the actual practice. And the reason is because leadership has not been able to transcend beyond themselves. The level of authenticity that leaders have is not strong enough. At least most leaders that I have come in contact with, most of my colleagues in the industry, I have met quite few that is finding it difficult to be congruent as leaders. I may not know their background, I may not know what have constituted to them having that kind of character. But what I strongly have observed is that they like it, they appreciate it, but how can they practice it? Until you become a leader who can overcome yourself to be able to do what is right at every point in time, you are always going to have challenges and problem of practicing even what you believe in. So I think this conversation should continue. And I'm using this opportunity to even say that in time to come, maybe we should also invite Sasha to have a conversation with us at the OLDN I segment. The leaders need to be tutored once again. The leaders need to be spoken to. And also maybe the opportunity also should be provided for them to explain or express their views as to the reason why it's always very difficult for us to practice what we know will even bring about the actual development of our organizations. They believe in it, but the problem lies in applicability, it lies in practicing the actual thing that we believe in.
Okay, thank you. For the benefit of Sasha, our ICE segment focuses on industry, commerce, and entrepreneurship. So we have members who are in that ICE segment, and Mrs. Maureen is leading that together with Mr. Mompati Kadi. Dr. Dotun, you might need to comment. I understand you have another meeting coming shortly.
Thank you very much, Sasha, for this exposure. And my note is actually filled here, but I'm trying to see. Now, let me speak from my own experience. As a consultant, this is what I find out. Most SME, fortunately, you are also in this area, they find it difficult to collaborate. And when I speak with most of the CEOs, this task or this assignment to 1, 2, 3 people, why don't you allow one person to do that? This person can focus on 1 or 2 other things. So how do we raise the level of awareness and enlightenment among the SMEs owners so that they can appreciate the importance of collaboration? Second question I want to ask is this. You made mention of bringing people of different background together in order to have better results than those of similar approach. I want to differentiate between similarities and differences and shared mindset. At what point in time do these interfere with each other? Sorry, and my last question is, now, one of the challenges, you actually mentioned that in the issue of diversity, but I must tell you that it's very prominent and pronounced here in Nigeria, maybe because we have the largest ethnic groups. We have more than 3,600 ethnics in Nigeria. And this play out when it comes to collaboration. You see issues of, you mentioned issue of how do we help leaders to follow? Because you mentioned leaders should also learn how to follow. How do leaders follow in a practical sense, particularly when it has to do with collaboration? Thank you.
Those are really great questions. I think I tracked most of them. I think to start from the beginning, to help leaders learn how to adopt collaboration, I think the biggest conversation that needs to happen is seeing how ready their organization and them themselves are to collaborate. So identifying which processes they are currently doing and which structures they have in place that are actually inhibiting effective collaboration instead of supporting it. It's really important to look at these practices, especially when you're talking from a leadership perspective. When a CEO is like, I am being collaborative and working with them, it's really helpful to observe for a while and then report back some and provide feedback, right? Some of the practices that they're doing that are actually hindering it and hindering the ability of people below them to share ideas with them. A lot of CEOs have this tendency, or they don't realize the unintended effects of some of the ways that they behave that actually disinvite people giving them any sort of feedback. When we talk about similarities and differences, and we talk about shared mindsets, that is very crucial, right? Because you can have a very diverse group of people that all have the same mindset, and then you're not going to get the benefits of collaboration if you had people from different perspectives. And so that's part of why I'm trying to highlight the importance of acquired diversity traits in this conversation, because if you look at across those traits, you can sometimes start to break down some of the more traditional of what everyone looks different. That means they have different perspectives, or that they're going to be coming at this from a different way. And that's not always true, right? Especially with people who've been in organizations for 10 years, they're used to doing it the same way the organization has always done it. But if you pull in people that are at different levels of experience within the company, that will start to break apart what you will see within the groupthink mindset, right? That happens with a lot of embedded people within organizations. And that's why it's really important to bring in people who have been with the company who just joined to come into conversations, people who are at different levels and people who have been there for like decades. That's part of what that will help with changing the mindset shift. And then I've forgotten the last question, but I thought it was a good one.
It's okay. It's okay. So because of others, so let me just allow others to ask their questions. I think that'll be all for me. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Fundi, your input.
Okay, I mean, for me, I'm still wondering how I have come to get this level of knowledge just within. I only joined this network, I mean, just about over a week. And for me, I just want to state that first, that I haven't had this level of impact in any sort of network that I've joined, or association that I've joined, you know, in my past experience. So this is really, really very commendable. And I've learned quite a lot today, and I've been learning quite a lot in the past over a week. But just to lend my voice a bit to the discussion on collaboration, inclusiveness, and all of that, and the question as to why CEOs or leaders are not are receptive of it, but they don't practice it. So as we were speaking, two things came to my mind, or three things particularly, and that's more or less like mindset, motivation, and method. So I was trying to place what collaboration is, and I think that if it's taken as a method, then for the CEOs or for the leaders, regardless of what title you hold, I think the issue lies in the mindsets of the people, the leaders, as well as the motivation of the leaders. And I asked myself a very particular question is, who do you think you are? I've seen, when it comes to collaboration, I've seen position, when people define themselves, they define themselves first as to the position that they hold as leaders. And when leaders stay at a level where it's first about, they define themselves with position rather than the responsibility. Okay. Immediately is, I think, since I am a CEO, why should someone else tell me what to do? So, and that's a mindset that actually makes it very difficult for them to effectively collaborate, even though they give a yes to the fact that they want to collaborate. But when leaders stay at the point of identifying who they are as a function of the position that they occupy, it's usually very difficult for them to embrace collaboration, from my own experience. I've attended meetings before where I have to say something, and then, or I'm in a WhatsApp group, and because the founder of the WhatsApp group has an opinion, and another person is saying, I think this is it, and then you feel like a rebellious person by saying what you think it is, because I'm the founder. So I'd say that motivation and mindsets are really, really the crippling, the issues around leaders not accepting or not working, accepting but not working in line with, you know, collaboration, inclusiveness, and diversity. So it's easier said than done, and I think the first level of success for me as I close would be ability for you to realize that you are where you are is what your problem is as a person. Why am I not accepting collaboration? And what can I do to accept collaboration will help every leader to be able to move from one level to the other. So the question would be that I'll be asking is, how do we help leaders get away from the defining themselves based on the position that they occupy, and on that basis acting, as opposed to defining their responsibility, they're defining themselves as a function of their responsibility and the results they are expected to deliver. So how do we help leaders move from one angle to the other?
Yes, can I hold you, Sasha, there? Just think through it as I pick someone else. We have about 5 minutes before we get Ms. Maureen. So take note of that question from Madam Funbi. How do we get leaders move from position to actually taking their responsibilities seriously? Anyone else with a question? Timmy. Question, contribution?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sasha, for the wonderful session. I've learned a lot, and I may just summarize what she has said, giving an example of the body. If every part of the body wants to be hand or legs, that means that the body will not perform its function effectively. How do you eat? How do you see? How do you carry out activities if all the body is just maybe ear or hand? So collaboration, I believe, like she has said, makes the organization to move forward to perform optimally, effectively. Diversity, as she has said, is very, very important, and I agree totally with her. And when we see the importance, because I think what most people think is that diversity is a form of obstruction, a form of barrier to move forward. But when we change our mindsets, when we act from informed position, like Funbia said, when our mindset is well orientated, then we'll see diversity as an advantage. We'll be able to take feedback. Then I learned also about trust, about making people comfortable with their feedbacks. When people feel their feedback is not making sense or it's rubbish, you know, they would not want to be free to give an open feedback. And when a company does not take feedback, it cannot move forward, because you cannot know the friction, you cannot know the pains, you cannot know the benefits the customers are expecting. So through collaboration, people are able to give honest feedbacks. So I think these are the things I've learned so much from this program. I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Jane, you are into learning and development. And is there anyone else, Mr. Tabani? Jane.
You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
For me, it's the same thing as Fumbi has said. It's all about learning. And in terms of the session today, mine is just to say thank you. I've learned a lot. And the points that have been raised, they kind of resonate to what I'm into. And they kind of bring a lot of sense and picture into. So Sasha, thank you so much for today's session. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Jane is into learning and development. I think you need to connect with Sasha as well as you try to establish yourself in learning and development. Yes, Sasha, you have a question that you have to respond.
Yeah, what Kumbi said was really important. That is one of the biggest difficulties in why collaboration is not happening. The biggest thing to realize is collaboration is about turning the I into the we. And one of the biggest difficulties with leaders, especially when they were trained up in more traditional settings, in terms of I am the leader, it is my choice to make this decision. I am the one who's now in charge. I've worked my way up. I'm choosing this because I want to make the decisions. That thought process of the I is what's at the fundamental odds with collaboration. Collaboration is all about the we. And when you can shift the mindset to be like, we have accomplished this, we have achieved this, and it's not about the individual, that's what can help leaders start to open up their mindset in terms of in the ability to listen to other people's perspectives and realize that their success is my success and that we are succeeding together. It's not just me who's succeeding on my own. And that is a very hard switch to do because traditionally it's been ingrained in you that that's how you need to succeed. Because a lot of people who have gotten to senior leadership positions have gotten to it in political environments where you need to get the accolades of I was the one in charge of this specific project who brought us all this internal revenue. It was my idea and I strove to it and I helped it succeed. And that is how you got to your C-suite level. So it's hard to get people at that level to change their mindset to start being we all of a sudden when you've been training them from the beginning to be about I in order for them to get to the level that they're at. And that's why it's all about shifting that mindset around. And that's why it's really hard in a lot of organizations to do. So it's about recognizing and calling out that dichotomy of it can't be about you or else you're never going to be open to collaborating. It has to be about the whole organization. And when the whole organization succeeds, even if it's a different person who's driving it, you are succeeding because you are leading that organization or that team and vice versa.
Thank you so much. As I try to download Ms. Maureen's slides, I want you to touch a bit on the issue of meetings. You mentioned, and there's a lot of literature that indicates that meetings in organizations have just become a routine and they're not producing much results. And I have Tsitsi, I am not sure if Tsitsi can comment on that as well, as an HR person. We have seen a lot of meetings and I have written an article about different meetings and people just conduct meetings for the sake of meetings and there are no much results. Exactly. So can you touch on that? Tsitsi, are you there? Do you want to comment on that before Sasha? I'm trying to download Mrs. Maureen's slides here. Yes, Tsitsi.
Thank you very much, Doc. But I kind of joined in late, but I think I can keep where we are and what is happening. Yeah, unfortunately, that is very true in some instance. And I think what is making the meetings to be just meetings is that the CEO already has a decision. So whatever contribution that are coming into the meeting, they are null and void because the leaders are kind of standing in their position already. So they are just a routine in that they want the minutes to record that there was a meeting. But however, in some organizations, meetings are really meetings, you know. There is that incorporation of whatever the contributions that are made in the meeting, and there's a real implementation plan towards whatever it is. So I still think that we need to conduct the meetings and try to push for the implementation of what has been discussed in the meeting. So I think the whole idea of collaboration, the whole idea of making use of the team, the whole idea of being together, moving from the I and we, as Sasha is saying, comes in when you discuss things together and you say, this is what we are doing. So we are doing that as an organization, not as an individual, not just as a director in HR or whatever way you are. But I think when we come to that point where we understand that it's about we doing our things. And also remember, the moment we move to the we, the better, because it means everybody is pulling their strength to whatever it is. But if the leaders remain in the I zone, then there's difficulty because you know, sometimes the employees just sabotage and say, okay, that's what they want to do, let them do it. So yeah, I think we need to take this meeting seriously and do implement what we would have discussed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And congratulations, I saw on Facebook on your academic award. I saw the session this afternoon.
Sorry, hello.
Thank you, Doc.
Yes, okay. Dr. Chijoke.
Yeah, I also joined late. I want to ask a question. Yeah, in as much as I align with the school that collaboration, teaming, cooperation is very important. How do the leader or a leader deal with a weak link in the group? You know, we talk about the we. Yes, the we. But in that we, in that team, sometimes there are people that are not doing anything or they are doing little. So how does the leader, you know, deal with this issue? Because if in a team or in a group, some people are doing exceedingly well, while others are doing little and nothing, and everyone shares the glory, shares the benefit, that also could also demotivate or demoralize the ones that are doing actually pushing, moving. So how? My question is how will the lead with this kind of issue? Thank you.
Yes, that all kind of goes back to the meeting concept too, of what I wanted to make a point of there too. So I'm going to start with what you brought up. My perspective is when you have someone in a team who is not contributing fully to it, I believe there's a couple things that are underpinning that. They might not understand their role within that team, what they're supposed to be contributing and how what they're contributing is effective and will help create or solve or help the team achieve their goals. Alternatively, it could also be that they honestly are just not needed on the team. Maybe they don't have a role and that's why they're not feeling very excited or engaged, because there isn't actually work for them to do. And I think it's important to understand and look at it from both perspectives. And you can look at it from two sides of the coin. You can either create what their role should be, or you can move them to a team that will allow them to use their skill sets to help that team succeed, because that team is missing and needs them and they have a role in that team. Or you need to better clarify what you are envisioning their role is going to be in your team. But I find that all comes down to role clarity and them not understanding how they should be able to fully engage. I'm a very optimistic perspective that people all want to be engaged, right? I think organization development comes with that perspective that everyone wants to be participating in contributing to teams. So I would suggest that you look at the role that they're playing and how you can better define that or how you can better utilize their skill sets. And that kind of goes to meetings as well. I honestly think one of the
minute now, yes.
I'll really quick. One of the main reasons meetings are not successful is because they aren't thought out clearly what the goal of the meeting is. If the goal of the meeting is only to provide information out and report information out, be very clear about that. Don't make people participate in this meeting that you don't actually care about their information, because that's a waste of their time. And maybe don't do a meeting. Maybe it's a report or like a video presentation instead of a meeting that they can watch on their own time. And when you have a meeting, make sure that everyone that's invited to the meeting has a role. We invite way too many people to meetings. That's like the golden rule. There's usually way too many people in the meetings and they don't actually need to be there. They're there more for FYI, or we wanted you to know what we talked about. That is what meeting notes are for. Take meeting notes of what was discussed in the meetings, and that way people who only need to be aware of it can review those at their leisure and don't have to spend an hour in a meeting that they're just there to know that it happened. And that's my thing about meetings. In a minute.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we exist to ignite insightful conversations, and I think you agree that Sasha did ignite a lot of conversations. And we'll leave that to the HR, law, and security segment. And Jane is here. She has to find a way to bring Sasha into that segment and have contributions as well to that segment. Quickly, Mr. Mompati, I see your hand up. We are now taking Ms. Maureen's time. Mr. Mompati.
Greetings once again. I just wanted to ask Sasha that if maybe you are a new leader into an organization and in the first two meetings, that you are holding with your subordinates, you realize that they are just quiet people, what do you do?
You need to build the connection and relationships. If they're quiet and they're not participating, and especially if you're a new leader, you haven't spent enough time just building the relationships and developing trust with your people. So instead of trying to dive into being productive in your meetings, just spend some time building those connections and getting to know each other and do some team building activities instead. And I'm willing to bet that they will be more engaged in further meetings after that.
Thank you. We'll come back to that. Ms. Fauzia.
Sorry, just maybe because there are some people, you know, always there, we have to get them out from their, their comfort zone. So the best way, so we can just give them like a project that demand the collaborative, you know, solutions. I mean, this is the best way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next speaker. Yes, Fauzia, next speaker.
Yeah. So I introduce Miss Maureen. Maureen, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. I'm fine.
Welcome to OLDN edition. Really, I'm so glad to have you today. I really like your profile. Actually, I was discussing with Jane always about you. So
thank you.
Please, I will let you introduce yourself.
Right. My name Maureen Omeibe. I'm a business executive, a business management professional with interest in corporate development, corporate finance and strategy, negotiation, effective team building. I'm actually a very versatile person. I also have a background in leadership, have a background in development, have a background in policy. To round it up, I'm simply an African woman that have a very strong interest in the development of the continent of Africa. And my work is at the intersection of women enterprise, public leadership, and business. I work with the GAP Group Nigeria, a manufacturing, haulage, logistics, and property conglomerate in Nigeria. We've been around for some 2 decades, and we are operating in Nigeria and some parts of West Africa. So I became part of this project OLDN because their values interchanges, it intercepts, and it kicks a particular nerve in my heart. You know, the organization that is sold out completely for development, for continuous development of persons that are Africans, for persons that are non-Africans, for anybody from any part of the world. OLDN is signing interest in development of people, organization, community, and the global community. So that is what brought me into this fantastic organization. And it has been a very smooth journey. I also founded a network for women and public policy, a social development network that has a mandate in developing women through economic productivity, through research, tech innovation, and trainings. So I am basically someone focused on development, but I vowed into 3 areas to be able to execute my interest in development of the African continent. So thank you very much. This afternoon, this evening, we are given this opportunity to discuss operational policies as a strategic driver for organizational development practice. I had already done a very comprehensive slides before I got to know that I just have 25 to 30 minutes to deliver this presentation. So what I have this evening is just an extraction of what I think is the key information that I need to share with all of you this evening on operational policies being a strategic driver for organizational development practice. So this evening, we are going to be looking at the overview of the webinar. That's overview considering this topic. We are going to be looking at the relevance of operational policies. We are going to be looking at key organizational principles that can be integrated in operational policies of business organization. And of course, we are going to be looking at stages of policy development. For the purpose of time in this webinar, it was very important for me to make this presentation as concise as possible, because the topic we are discussing is a very wide one and is something that whenever I have the opportunity, I am going to do exactly what I had wanted to do today, which is to look at operational policies across sectors and across continents. When we are talking about operational policies, it is important we understand that it is very diverse and it is determined and polarized by the exact business functions of each business organization. So, but today I am going to just focus strictly on principles of operational policies in business. That says in manufacturing, trading, and sales organization. Now, on the overview, around the globe, business organizations persistently swim in the confluence of goals, people, skills, talent, the ever-changing internal and external environment. This places on their shoulders an unimaginable pressure and some degree of complexities that requires instruments, tools, and techniques for its management. And this is even more evident as the global community battles the grievous emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. While it is believed that development and meticulous implementation of operational policies is one of the critical factors in driving the missions and objectives of business, it is important for us to note that it is not just enough for us to put together policies, no matter how beautiful or how fantastic it looks on paper. What actually brings about the result we are looking for is our ability to deliver a suitable and compliant policies, our ability to execute them according to what it stipulates, and of course, our ability to review these policies from time to time. This is what builds business resilience, brand strength, momentum, and lead organizations to delight their customers. Globally, business organizations is no longer concerned with just meeting the demands and needs of customers in their businesses. The problem now is beyond just meeting the demands of your customers. The challenge is how can you delight your customers with whatever products or services that you have crafted up to give to them. At the post-COVID-19, if a business organization is still not able to define how they can delight their customers with the way they run their operations, I want to believe that they are not yet ready to navigate through the incoming years. So this topic will, in concise terms, reveal how organization development practice can be institutionalized in business organizations by incorporating the key principles of OD in their operational policies at organizational level, sectoral level, or sub-sectoral level. Organizational level, talking about the private companies, private businesses owned by public or private individuals. Talking about sectors is talking about particular industries, that is an industry that is focused on a particular trend of business. And then when we are talking about subsector, we are talking about businesses that are found under a particular sector. So in Nigeria, for instance, we have numerous sectors. In our economy, we have numerous subsectors. And when we are looking at operational policies, we look into all these areas because an individual organization crafting their policies must consider the policies of the sectoral environment. It must consider the policies of the subsectoral environment. And sometimes, no matter how good the internal and external policies are, as an individual business, it is not enough to keep you going and keep you afloat in the business environment where you operate in. So build businesses in the sky, produce diamonds, and craft the best services in the world. If your business organization's operational culture is inconsistent and on ground zero, the business will not live. And I would like to repeat this. Build your business in the sky, produce diamonds, and craft the best services in the world. If your business organization's operational culture is inconsistent and on ground zero, your business will not live. It doesn't matter how much resources that you plunge into that business, it will not survive. Tom Peters, the author of, can we move this slide? We are still on overview.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Tom Peters, the author of 301 Great Management Ideas, said, competitive advantage that sticks is invariably about 100, 1,000, 1,000 tiny details, each readily copyable, but cumulatively extraordinary in impact. Now, this 1,000 tiny details is found in every business organization's operational policy. Therefore, operational policy is those little details of how your business functions day in, day out, that the organization has decided to compile, articulate, and project to all the stakeholders of your business to make sure that they are all updated and they are brought at speed to how your business functions. Now we are going to relevance of operational policies. For the sake of time, I wouldn't want to dwell much on what operational policies is. I want to believe down this slide, we'll be able to see what is best, what can best describe what operational policies is. In that consideration of the reality of the complex and ever-changing environment of business, as well as the massive internal and external functions, organizations are beckoned to be deliberate, holistic, and fully committed to the orchestration of systems to support the smooth running of the business with a high degree of clarity on what needs to be done, how, when, and who leads the action across levels and departments of organizations. So this is trying to explain that having appreciated, having realized, having known that businesses are operating in a very high degree of complex environment, that there is no smooth running of any business organization except there are guides that can lead that business from stage A to stage B to stage C to stage D in terms of how works are being carried out, how connections are being made, how products and services are being delivered, and how merchandise are being received on return. Operational policies provide standards. I want us to pay attention to this because that is where the key relevance of operational policies reside. Operational policies provide standards, guides, procedures, set business priorities, habits, eliminate complexities and confusion in the day-to-day running of businesses. Organization operational policy is also expected to provide compliance pipelines for businesses and entrench consistency in exceeding the expectations, in not just exceeding the expectation of customers, but also delighting them, the employees, and other relevant stakeholders in the business. Now, I want us to look at something in this relevance of operational policies. When we are talking of policies in business organizations, if we sit down and count it very well, you can get, depending on the size of your business, you can get as many as 50 subtitles of your operational policies. That is because beyond the external environment where businesses are operating, the internal structure of businesses also have many tentacles. And in each of those tentacles, something is going on. Activities are ongoing on day to day. So if we are talking about the stakeholders that we must give consideration to when we are devising our policies, do we understand who our stakeholders is? And this is an area that I would like all the business owners, the researchers, and the entrepreneurs to make contribution to, because I try as much as possible to make this presentation a practical one, almost from experience of various business organizations that I had dealings or had interface with. Who are the stakeholders in the businesses? And I want to believe that we all understand that with the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic, our stakeholders in our businesses have changed. The stakeholders you had in 2019 can no longer be the same stakeholders that you have in this year, 2020. For the change and disruption that have occurred, have created some special stakeholders for you in your business, and they are all to be put into consideration when you are crafting your policies. Originally and traditionally, when we want to have our policies developed, we look at our customers, because it is the operational policies that determines what will be the tempo or the temperament of our customer service deliveries. It is the operational policy that determines how employee A relates with employee B on certain projects and assignments. It is the operational policy that decides how, for instance, the GAP group connects with the traditional community where we are operating. So all these things must be given adequate recognition and consideration before we talk about developing our operational policies. So without operational policies, there will be complete chaos and confusion in our organizations. And what operational policies have come to do in business organization is to remove that complexity, to remove that confusion, to remove that, inability or impairment in understanding with clarity what the company is to be doing at every point in time. And I want us to go and discuss key organizational development principles that are required to be integrated in operational policies of business organization. Before we started this conversation, Ms. Jane had already briefed this house on the key principles and representations of organizational development as a discipline. Why we agree that operational policies could be deployed to champion the practice of organizational development in our company or organization, we should be cautious because it is not exactly every OD principles that can be integrated using operational policies. But it is also a delight to note that there are several shared values between companies' operational policies and the values on which organizational development is embedded and grounded in. So I want us to know that this presentation is just an extraction from the many values and principles, from many theories and principles of organizational development. This presentation is just an extraction of those principles that is congruent or that is in agreement with the values of several organizational operational policies that is in practice as of today. The key organizational development principle that requires to be integrated in operational policy of this organization is number one. We all know that the practice of OD is grounded in distinct set of core values and principles that guide behaviors and actions. These values include inclusion. It touches on respect. It includes collaboration that Sasha have talked about. It includes employee participation. It includes empowerment, authenticity. All these values that I have listed, they are all values that are fundamental and will expand and sustain the impacts of operational policies as it relates to customers, employees, and key stakeholders. In business organizations, for instance, research has shown that when employees are valued, they are respected, they are engaged, They are included and allowed to make decisions, to be part of the decision making in an organization, that it heightens their morale and empowers them to perform optimally. When the psychological status or the psychological welfare of an employee is well taken care of, there is every possibility, there is every tendency, it is very practical. It is seen in everyday operation of business organizations that that particular employee will perform at optimum with whatever responsibilities and assignment that is given. Now we are talking about respect. It is people that run organizations, and every single human being deserves to be respected. Every single person making contributions to the success, growth, and development of any business organization deserve to be respected. And when we respect whoever that is called our stakeholder in our business organization, there is high propensity for them to maintain their loyalty with us as a business organization. If you respect your worker, he will reciprocate in certain ways that you will be surprised as the business owner or as an organizational leader. If you respect your customer, of course, you will know that that customer will keep visiting and relating with your business organization. The bottom line is that there is no single person existing or interacting with any business organization that would like to be disrespected. And these are the core values that companies' operational policies tries to take care of. These are the things they try to bring to the emotion of their business so that whoever that is relating with them, we have a reason to stick to them for a very long time. And business owners all over the world, all of us have come to realize that irrespective of the kind of business you run, if you do not have customers, if you do not sell your product or services, you have no business. Until you begin to attract customers, you begin to retain customers, and you begin to have a relationship with your customers, your business will not thrive. And you cannot claim or lay claim to your business practicing sustainable, development, engaging in sustainable development practices. So operational policy tries to build a habit for an organization. A habit is what you see an individual or a business entity do almost every day. A habit is repetitive in nature. A habit has consistency. It has laces of persistency. So operational policies of companies are those things that project the company to their external and internal environment. And one more thing is also very important. Organization will succeed in their development strategies if they do not just think of the current situation, but also think about what the future holds for their business. Operational policy also, I want us to understand, preempts the future of organizations. Operational policy preempts the future of the organizations. Certain policies are crafted in expectation of something that hasn't happened. And in the environment that my company, for instance, operates, most of our policies are in expectation of what is going to happen. When we have experience, we learn from the experience of what has happened with people that operated before we came into the market. Certain policies, you develop them because you are expecting that something may happen in the future. So policies, as it relates to customers, employees, and key stakeholders, requires that there should be collaboration, there should be respect, there should be inclusion, there should be authenticity. That is, people are exactly what they project. People are exactly what they project. When a business says that they are going to do a particular thing, they go ahead to do it. They don't thwart their decisions. They don't go behind the doors to do a different thing. They are consistent, they are congruent, and whatever they say they will do is what they do. And that's what operational policies does in organizations. Now, on the other hand, the second line, organizational development celebrates change. Of course, we all know we cannot talk about organizational development without talking about change and transformation. Organizational development celebrates change, transformation, and dynamism of organizations. Strategies and operational policies are always on review. It is a known fact, and there were some companies in the past, and I will not mention the name of the company, is a regional company just like the Gap Group. Some of them were running with about 2 years operational policy plan. And they didn't figure out that there is need for operational policies to be in review. Because you may just throw in a policy for year 2020, and you are going into the next month, probably the month of February, and then something drastic has happened in your environment. As long as the environment of your business remains dynamic, your operational policies must be dynamic as well. And so, organizational development showcases and projects principles of dynamism, flexibility, and this agrees with operational policies of so many companies. This agrees with the tenets of operational policies in business organizations. It is always in review. They are always changing to meet with the changing demand of the environment. So we cannot be static with our operational policies. For instance, in the logistics arm of the Gap Group, in year 2019, we have some companies that we have an MOA, which demands that we supply their products in a certain warehouse. It was written, it was adopted, and it is on implementation. But immediately this COVID-19 came on board, it was canceled. The MOA was canceled. Therefore, in our employment policies, for instance, which says that in every fortnight, a particular dispatcher will leave the company and go to that location, wait for their employee to join them, for both of them to go to the warehouse to make delivery. It cannot happen anymore because they have chosen that we bring the products whenever they call us on phone, or whenever they want, they come themselves to pick it. So what did we do? We immediately retrieved the daily logistics operational policy and ensure that it is rerouted. The employees on those routes are routed, they are rerouted to other places. So if we decided to run with a policy that is going to take 3 months and nobody can change it until probably the management or somebody from somewhere comes to approve it, it becomes completely impossible for the company, for the organization to function. So organizational development cherishes this flexibility. It cherishes change. It cherishes transformation. And also, operational policies of companies supposed to reflect all these things. If you are running your operations the same way, year in, year out, of course, you are going to be obsolete. So the way people perceive you has to be transformative. The way you relate to people, the way you deliver your products and services, the way you apologize to your customers, the way you attend your meetings. We're just talking about meetings, have people, companies, businesses, organizations holding meetings and meetings and meetings. Operational policies defines how this meeting is held. Operational policies defines the agenda of the meetings, the dates of the meetings, and the roles of individuals that will be participating in the meeting beforehand. If it's an emergency meeting, operational policy still defines how the emergency meeting is conducted, so that no single employee comes and sits down and will not do anything on the meeting table. So these are the areas that operational policies can extract values of organizational development and entrench it within their framework, and then organization will have faith and we have hope, hope of being transformative in years to come. So the third principle I want us to look at is promotion of equity, equality, diversity, strategic awareness amongst all members of the organization. Organizational development promotes equality. And in my interview with the OLDN television, I have mentioned it. And this is one of the things that attracted me to the OD field. It wasn't looking through the gender lenses. It was looking at every human being as people that were created by God. OD discipline tends to see every human being as equal. And of course, except a company do not want to be sustained in the environment, except a company do not want to last for a very long time, a company do not want their existence to be from generation to generation. If you are going to trivialize equality in your organization, you are taking a very big risk. If you are thinking that because 15 years and 20 years ago, nobody is talking about equality in the business organizational space, nobody is talking about how many people that are in your board members and how many male are in your board members and how many female are in your board members. For all of us that owns businesses, things has changed. And OD field is trying to let us know that it will even keep changing. So the question is, how ready are we? Operational policies must spell out tasks and responsibilities with no bias to gender. It then means you will not come into a company, for instance, and then tells a particular staff that because he's a female staff, he's going to be going to the company kitchen to serve everybody tea in the morning. So operational policies supposed to define all of these things and ensure that nobody is marginalized. And this particular principle is also a shared value in organizational development. So it is very relevant if we marry them. And I am speaking to all people, just like myself, that all these things that we are highlighting in organizational development, organizational leadership and development network, that it is very, very important we begin to implement them. We should not just be having this conversation and reading, piling it up in our memories and going back home to sit down. It is important we begin to implement them because, as it says, every business that decides to overlook, trivialize, or remain indifferent to the challenges of the time and the volatility of the volatility of tomorrow, your business will go down the drain. You will close shop, no matter how big you are or how big your resources counts at this point in time. So operational policies should be able to capture gender balance. You should be able to encourage and also promote diversity. You should promote strategic awareness amongst all members of the organization. The reason is this: if any organization decides to bring real practice of organizational development into their establishment, you have to begin to look for the long-term impact of whatever principle you are introducing and whatever you are pushing to be in practice in your business organization. Diversity, Sasha has spoken about it. We all know what it is. Nobody's going to be discriminated upon because you are coming from a particular region, and I use my country as an example. Here we are having a lot of challenges of diversity. We have not been able to embrace it in fullness. We've not been able to understand the place of diversity in the development of our organizations. We've not understood that no company can be pragmatic without having to open your doors to diversity. If you are going to emphasize that a particular role, probably you feed your company with certain people from certain background, maybe people from your place, and you think that certain responsibilities and tasks are going to be reserved for them, while the other ones does whatever thing that you spell out for them, it is something that will no longer work, especially after now. Especially after now, because the employees, the environment of business, in fact, now everybody is becoming very, very aware of what the what their expectations, their rights, you know, their career lines, their career demands is working in your business organization. So it is going to be more difficult for us to begin to run the way we have been running. So it is important we begin to change certain notions, we begin to change certain practices, and we begin to take certain things serious so that our business future can be, you know, sustained.
10 minutes, Madam Maureen.
Wow, okay. Now, traditionally, for the effectiveness of policies must be well communicated, of course. Policies must be well communicated. And of course, when we are talking about organizational development tenants, we are talking about transparency. There is no transparency if communication is not flowing very well. There is no transparency without communication. So operational policies usually, traditionally, they emphasize and lay much emphasis on communication. When policies are developed, for it to be delivered, consultations must go on, and those consultations, during those consultations, employees and all stakeholders in the company is consulted. They are communicated on what is about to be done in terms of development of policies, and they are allowed to make their input. So when they make their input, it is important to them because the policies is going to affect them. And most of these policies, the operational policies, it is actually the employee that implements them. It is the employee that implements these policies. So it is very, very important we involve them. And then, because organizational development is also emphasizing on transparency, is emphasizing on free communication, people need to be allowed, people need to be encouraged, there has to be an inquiries, there has to be asking for people's opinions. So organizational development principle in this regard can be married to operational policies, and it will just fortify the policies the more for greater impact. The principles of continuous improvement of the business and employees. This is another strong emphasis that is being led by organizational development theories and principles. Principles of continuous improvement of the business and the employees. Now, operational policies is for efficiency. Now, principles of continuous improvement and of the business and the employees will not just bring efficiency. It will bring efficiency, it will bring improved performance, it will bring the increase of the triple bottom line expectations of the organization. Because when an employee is impacted on, when he's very competent, when it has been trained, he has acquired all the necessary skills that he needs to execute his or her responsibilities, there is no room again for lapses. There is no room for shortfall in expectation of deliveries that they are supposed to make. And I do believe strongly that the principles of continuous improvement and of the business and employees should also be integrated in our operational policies. If you don't train your staff, you will spend a lot of money correcting errors, managing your waste, and of course, bearing very costly brunt of people making mistakes, especially in the line of production. Now, I have very few minutes. I just want to run around the stages in policy development. What is very key is for people to understand that even with the integration of principles of OD in our operational policy delivery, there is need for us to still understand that the development of policy stages must still be meticulously considered. Every simple stage in policy development must not be missed, simply because you are integrating the principles of organizational development in your operational policy deliveries. So every single stage must still be passed through. And stage number one is that before you craft any operational policies, you must identify the need. What is the need? Why are you creating this policy? What problem is it targeting to solve? What kind of complexity is it trying to eliminate in the system? That is very, very important. And number two, identify who will take lead responsibility. Who is it that will take the lead responsibility? Is it an individual? Is it a work group? Is it a subcommittee? Or is it just staff numbers? These are the things that is required according to experts and according to research. Because apparently, there is no how a policy, whatever type of policy it is, will work if it is not being effectively implemented. Stage 3 is that you should gather information. Policies must be delivered. Policies must be crafted out of a pool of relevant and necessary information. When you develop a policy without adequate pool of information, such policies will not stand the test of time. Because there are things that are factorial that you cannot ignore in development of policies. All of them must come to bear. Do you have any legal responsibilities in this area? Is your understanding accurate, up to date? Have other organizations tackled the same issue? In my company, for instance, we have used this question to answer so many of our policy consultation problems. When we want to craft a particular policy, especially when it comes to regulations, we will always ask,
Okay, I think we lost her temporarily there. As we try to wrap up today's conversation, Sasha, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I need you to comment on the values. I attended one of your presentation with Penn State University when you were presenting your research on the values of OD. Can you just probably comment on these values as we wait for her to come back? The values of OD.
Yeah, so the research we did was looking at OD values from a future-oriented perspective, so thinking forward into what we can achieve. And the values that we identified, there were 9 core values, 4 of which are more focused internally in terms of like how we practice as OD practitioners. And these values include continuous learning and improvement. They include, sorry, now I have to remember all of them. Continuous learning and improvement, awareness of self and system, courageous leadership, and integrity are more of our values that are more internal, but they also are important in how we work externally with our clients. And then we had 5 values that applied more externally in terms of our clients. And I presented on 2 of them. So collaborative engagement and diversity. And then we also had trust and respect, and client growth and development, and strategic practicality. Part of this research also related to identifying specific behavioral indicators that will help us understand when we are effectively demonstrating these values in our practices with our clients. And we published a journal in JABS with our research, and I think one of the newer publications of the OD review journal is also going to include a summary of our results as well, along with some other research that was done and some other work that was done onto the definition of OD, capabilities within OD, and some of the vision and essence of OD as well.
Prof. Chijoke, policy development, what's your perspective in context of the values that has been presented?
Yeah, I really like her perspective in the operational policies. I think it really bridges the gap of a lot of what we do in organization development. We understand how an organization should be able to work together and some of the different skill sets like collaboration and diversity that are important. But what operational policies do, as she's been explaining, is they really allow organizations to implement these ideas. They create the structure and the plan and think through how that will look within their actual organization, and then provide a guide to help us embed any of the relevant values, or make sure embed and demonstrate the values within the organization and tie them directly to the results that the organization is looking to achieve. So I really liked your presentation on kind of drawing the connection point of how operational policies, if you leverage them and you create them intentionally, how they can really help support the businesses and help you implement some of these values in practice.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Prof. Chijioke.
Yeah, first of all, I need to thank Maureen for this very tropical and topic. The role of policies, I choose to call it organizational policies, cannot be overemphasized in organization, because policies serves as guide to managerial thinking and decision making. It supports all what organizations do. It hinges on policies. And in the context of the pandemic, I guess that's what you asked. Yeah, in the context of the pandemic, yeah, policy development, even before now, scholars advocate that policies shouldn't be changed frequently. But in view of this pandemic, organizations don't have areas of choices or choice, because the pandemic actually brought uncertainty. And to deal with these uncertainties, organizations must, try to make some change in their policies. For example, I will give you an example. For most universities, some universities, they don't believe in adopting online teaching approach. They tell you, no, we don't do online. It's not allowed and all that. They don't recognize it. They believe in face-to-face teaching. But with the pandemic, policies were changed overnight, because for you to cope with what is happening, you must be agile. Organizations must be agile. Organizations must be flexible. They must also be proactive. So in view of the pandemic, policy development is not something that is going to be rigid. Organizations must step up with different policies to actually address a lot of issues. And for policies, they are not policies are not limited to what you do, operational policies or whatever. I think organizational policies is broad. It targets different functional areas of the business. You have the financial policies or finance policies. You have manufacturing policies, R&D policies. All the aim of policy is to address, is to clarify ambiguity, is to tell people how to deal with issues that crop up in the course of doing their doing their tasks, or in terms of working in the organization. And the policies of the organization also support the strategies that firms would adopt. So in the context of the pandemic, policy need not to be rigid. Organizations need to do what? Develop policies that we align, that we address the challenges that the pandemic has thrown up or presents. So I think that is what I have to say.
Thank you. I think she's back. I'll give her time after Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Williams, any contribution on the issue of policies and policy development? Mrs. Williams. All right, she's not there. Mrs. Maureen, in 5 minutes so that we don't exceed our time.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. There was a power breakout, but it's resolved. So we're talking about stages of policy development. We talked about the first one. We've talked about the first one. What is it again?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, I think there's a connection. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you. Okay, I think there's a connection issue there. Mr. Kashifi, your perspective on policy development.
Yes, Dr. Justin. Hello and good evening, everybody. First of all, sorry for being late because I had some problem with some issues, family-related issues. And thank you for Ms. Maureen's wonderful presentation, though I came late. But I'm not going to discuss about the stages that what policy development goes through, but I would like to focus, emphasize on the need of a policy within in an organization. I'll give explain a practical, example in which I myself was involved in when I was working as a capacity development consultant with Ministry of Economy, Government Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. There, a national policy was required to be developed on capacity development because all the capacity development activities were not, they were not properly conducted, and every organization had their own policies. So we conducted a national capacity development assessment in which we developed a sort of questionnaire, and we conducted as a sample for 20 government institutions. Then after completing of this assessment, we prepared a report. The report focused on various findings and the problems which were in the organizations, and then we developed working groups. In the working groups, they were tasked with drafting a policy, a national policy, in which that must have been aligned with other government documents. But unfortunately, it was the time that I left the organization because of my contractual issues. I was a contractual staff. Overall, lack of a policy in an organization, of course, confronts the organization with various problems. Like, for example, in Ministry of Justice, when we currently I'm working, they do not have a specific policy for trainings. So the trainings conducted, there are a lot of problems they confront when they organize or conduct training. So overall, having a policy, because having policy will guide the organization to conduct themselves in a proper manner, and to assess, how much they have been effective and efficient in terms of implementing their strategies. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, right, and there's a question I will ask probably Sasha. Can you take that question after the presentation in the chat box? You probably can assist on that. Ms. Maureen, you can wrap up.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Justin. Before the power breakout, I was on information gathering. Information gathering is a very critical stage of policy development. Your quality of policy, the promptness of your policy is dependent upon the pool of information that was available at the developmental stage. If you don't have enough information, do not rush into policy enactment. Always have your information on ground. The information is the happenings, the situations, the stakeholders, the regulatory atmosphere. All these things are things that you need to dig into to be able to have extraction of where you are going to lay your hands when you want to define what your policies should be in those areas. Then we have a drafting policy, that is stage 4. Drafting policy is the place where you now put everything that you have together and then begin to put your policy into documents. At this point, it is important that the wording and the length or complexity of the policy are appropriate to those who will be expected to implement it. So this draft policy is also a very, very important stage in policy development, because if you are trying to eliminate complexities and then your policy document is also having layers of complexities, it has not solved any problem at all. So it is going to have clarity. Your wording should be very, very concise and clear. It's going to be on point of what you want to convey. There should be no ambiguity at all in drafting of policies. You must ensure, organizations must ensure that their policy document has the level of clarity that even the weakest person in the organizational team will be able to understand what the translation or what the information the policy document is trying to convey. Then the stage number 5 is consult with appropriate stakeholders. Consult with appropriate stakeholders. Understanding your stakeholders in business is very, very imperative. It is an integral part of your success as an organization. We have talked about collaboration. When you do not know who your stakeholders in your industry is or in your business organization, you cannot collaborate, or you may begin to collaborate with the wrong stakeholders. And stakeholders sometimes may be complex. For instance, in my industry, is of recent, because I attended a sustainable development training, that I got to realize that a certain people that we call area boys are also, stakeholders in the gap industries. Because each time importation comes in and we are bringing your trucks into the warehouse to offload your product or to offload your compartments, they must be attended to. They must be, placated. They must be paid in some cases. And at the beginning, we did not realize that we are just going to find a way of dealing with these individuals because we didn't see them as our stakeholders. But along the line, we just realized they are very important stakeholders. The GAP group did not employ them. The GAP group do not have them as, they are not our investors. They did not contribute any equity. They are not patronizing us. They do not do anything for us. Absolutely nothing, but they are stakeholders in our industry. And that is how it goes. Even when you want to craft your policy, you must understand that even those ones that you think are not giving, they don't yield anything to your business fortune. They are part of your stakeholders. And it is important you put them into consideration. Of course, in some cases, we consult them. Let them know that this is what we want to do. What do you think we should do in this area? And sometimes they give their opinions so that there won't be rancor. Because if you don't resolve it at that point in time, if it escalates, your business is going to spend fortunes to correct that escalation or whatever that has erupted because of your negligence at the point of, at the point where you would have consulted them, you neglected it and went ahead and cropped up a policy, and then it is, yielding to conflict in your environment. So, when we are also talking after that consultation stage number 5, I'm going to be rushing because I'm told I have few minutes.
2 minutes, yes.
Yes, please. Another thing that is very important for business organizations to consider is whether the procedures are required. When you have completed your policies, it is not enough until you set the procedures for execution of each task. Each task, in fact, a task that is as simple as the time of breakfast and the kind of cutleries that companies will use. A time of break, what time will staff take their tea, for instance, should be, there's supposed to be a procedure to define. And then there's supposed to be a procedure to define who goes into the kitchen, first of all, who is fed first, and who comes back. And then these are all very key things that will make an organization to run seamlessly. And then it comes to implementation. Implementation, who implements? If you had failed in the communication stage to communicate your stakeholders, to communicate your employees, who are the key people that will be implementing your policies, you are going to have challenges on implementation because they are going to be coming back to you. You are going to be losing your man hours attending to them, explaining over and over again. So In the implementation stage, at the communication stage, we always emphasize that you do your communication very well. You give adequate communication. You go back to ask your employees or your stakeholders if they understood, if they have clarity, the apex, the zenith clarity of what they're supposed to understand in the process of the development. If they give you a go-ahead, you continue to move to the next stage. If you fail to communicate very well at the implementation stage, you will start afresh to communicate, and that is a very, very big error, and it's going to be wasting resources for your organization. Then after implementation, then we have monitor, review, and revise. In some parts of Africa, we do not pay attention to monitoring, reviewing, and revisitation of our policies. When we throw policy into the system, we go back home to sleep. And this is not just happening in business organizations. It is happening in institutions, it's happening in government, it's happening even in NGOs. We just put policy down because policy requires a lot of resources. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of intellectual input for you to be able to come out with a very sound policy that can organize, that can, that can lead your business effectively. It is very, very demanding. So when organizations, especially business organizations, finish crafting a particular policy in a particular year, they go home. So monitoring is another thing that we must emphasize on, because you cannot ascertain what has happened. You cannot determine the impact of the policy that you have delivered if you do not monitor it. Monitoring means you are going to measure that policy against that targeted problem you wanted the policy to solve, because policy is never developed in abstraction. There is a reason why policies is being developed. And it is in the process of monitoring, implementation, reviewing what has happened, the outcome and the impact of the policy, that you will know whether you can continue to run with the policy or you will go back to revisit it. In some cases, you will just find out that there is a very, very important reason to go back to revisit, because of environment we have all noted changes. Sometimes in Africa especially, and in Nigeria, my country, sometimes in a year, we have 3 different conflicting policies that we will be dealing with. In a year, sometimes you have to run around so many times to be able to run with your businesses. So if you have a policy in January in Nigeria as a business organization, in March, you may have to go back and look at what has happened with that policy, because the tendency is that something may have changed. You may not even know because they won't communicate it effectively. And you will just be sitting down there, not realizing that something is going wrong with your business. So there is importance of monitoring. There is importance of review. Reviewing is for you to examine, look into it. Has this thing achieved the purpose? Has it achieved the purpose? Has it solve that particular problem that it was targeted at? If the answer is no, there is no exaggeration. And in policy, you have to say it and report it the way it is. Otherwise, you just be shooting yourself on the leg as a business organization. If it is not good enough and is not solving the problem, please, we need to revisit it.
Thank you. I will cut you there so that we have 13 minutes of interaction. Thank you so much for that presentation. And I want you to read the question that Tsitsi posed in the chat box as well, as we get others' contributions. Sasha, are you ready to respond to that question first? We have 12 minutes for an interaction. Yes. Yeah,
I'll do it quickly. I think Maureen kind of mentioned some stuff that will help with ensuring policy development isn't abused. Her step 5, I believe, was about getting other people's perspectives on it and consulting the appropriate stakeholders. Whenever policy development is created, it's extremely important to make sure that you are collaborating and working together with people who are going to be implementing the policy, even if they are considered the frontline workers. Their perspectives are instrumental in understanding and identifying gaps in the policy. And when you actually involve them into decisions, it kind of in some ways can help hold leadership accountable, because then it's kind of like we raise these issues. Granted, that again requires leadership buy-in at actually being good collaborators and actually wanting to involve people in decision-making processes. So to ensure that policies aren't abused, you need to really make sure that before you develop policies, before you start the policy development process, leadership is on board in including other people's perspectives into it. It's a very challenging process, because this is definitely where a lot of abuse happens. because a lot of times people aren't included in the decision making, and you do see policies that are created and generated, especially in public institutions and in businesses as well, that are for the benefit of the people in power that are actually drafting them. Maureen, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yes.
All right, yes.
I'll come to Maureen. And then you wrap up everything. I need Mavis to also comment. Mavis, thank you so much for joining us. I understand you are in South Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Can you please comment on that? I'll ask Maureen to then wrap it up.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hi, everyone. It's my first time to join you guys. Yes, I'm in South Africa. So interesting discussions. And I think Tsitsi had sort of asked that question. My thinking is around, you cannot change the system without changing the people who are working the system. One of the things that we're seeing is people are changing processes and policies. Like right now, we're saying people must be agile. We need agile processes, agile systems. And then you find that the people that are supposed to be enacting the policies are not in the space, or they're not developed to the level that they are able to actually enact those policies. So for me, looking at policy development, it must be done almost at the same, in fact, I probably most think that we probably need to develop our leaders so that we can get their buy-in and their commitment. Then we can do the policy development, if that makes sense. So that is my thinking, that, systemic and personal transformation is interdependent. And therefore, if we want people to, as I think someone was mentioning about Africa, especially where there's abuse, it's because our leaders are not developed to a place where they have transformed and they understand and they value, some of the organizational policies we have. And it's not selfish or self-centered. It's really to develop sustainable performance in an organization. So I think really thinking our leadership development is key in terms of, OD development, but also even, as we develop policies to transform and advance our organizations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that perspective. Yes, Maureen.
All right, thank you very much. I will respond to Sasha first and foremost. Sasha talked about ensuring that leaders or the people that are drafting the policies are not abusing the process or the content of the policy. If I get that question right, is that what she meant? Sasha, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. I was responding to a question in the chat box about that. How can you make sure that people developing policies don't abuse them? And the example was leaders in Africa creating constitutions that serve them instead of the people.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that is the question that I took from TC. I've read TC's question. You see, that is why before we came to the stages of policy development, we talked about what should be integrated. The point is that before you talk about policy development, there are some other factors that an organization must have dealt with before you now talk about developing policies. You remember that we talked about having information on ground before policies are enacted, and we are just talking about operational policies. Do remember I mentioned that because of the limited time that I had for this class, we were not delving into other types of policies. But because when you come to a business organization, you have about 5 or 6 branches of different policies. But what we are just dealing with is operational policies. That is policies that define how individuals respond to situations in the environment of the business, how they carry out their assignment, and how they deliver their products and services and they receive their customers. That's what we are dealing with today. So, but I will respond to that question. The essence of emphasizing on what the operational policy is talking about is very, very key to the development of other policies. When you come into an organization, it is the operational policy that determines the content and the quality of implementation and delivery that the other arms of policies will have. Remember that it's operational policies that is championing and promoting the principles of collaboration. It's promoting the principles of open communication. It is promoting the principles of authenticity in leadership. It is promoting the principles of equity, the principles of diversity, equality, and all of that. So you see that before we talk about even implementation of policies, the operational policies, the information pool you already have championed that this is how this company behaves. This is the habits that will be tolerated in this company. Because without these operational policies that will define and control and monitor how each individual execute their role in the company, abuse is imminent. It is not possible that you don't define how people are executing their roles and then you are expecting them not to abuse the process. They are going to abuse the process. Then another important thing is this. In a system is a system in organization, even a system in a nation at the national level. It is like an ecosystem. It works together. What happens in the society where organization operates impacts and determines what happens in the internal structure of that organization. So what I will respond to in ensuring that there is no abuse and that people are not using policies to satisfy a certain group of people in the organization is that if the operational policy have been well defined, it is the ability of the leadership of that organization to make sure that if anybody flouts or breaks the procedures or violates the tenets of the operational policies, that person is punished. Well, in a situation where it is leaders that are perpetrating the act, it becomes very difficult. And that is why the organizational development principle is very, very important that it is integrated in operational policies. So that even before a staff is brought into an organization, before task is given to that particular staff, they would have gone through certain process of initiation into the culture of the organization. Operational policy defines that. So if you are coming as a CEO of a company and you have come into the company and the policy says before you are given a go ahead to implement or execute any task, you must go through this training and sign documents that if you did not follow the operational policies of the company, you will be sanctioned. I don't think such a leader would want to play with the process. And that is why we are, pleading with everybody to embrace and champion OD principle in our organizations, because it is going to sanitize all the ills that we see that leadership of organizations. When we say leadership, please, I would like us to understand that leadership is not just the management level. We have top management, we have middle management, and of course we have lower management. When we are talking about leadership, we are talking about management at these three different levels. And it is just a place where we need to key our attention to when we are talking about organizational development. Let us all, for instance, all of us are seated here this afternoon. We have learned one or two things. It is for us to take it back home to where we work or where we run our businesses and concern and begin to speak to people about it. It is systemic. It is not something that will happen in a vacuum. Somebody has to put it in place. Somebody has to fight for it. And somebody has to make sure that it is working, irrespective of where the person, plays roles in organizations.
Thank you so much for that.
Hello.
Yes, Doc. And Sasha, I need you to answer Funbi's question in 1 minute after Prof. Chijoke.
Okay, Maureen, thank you once again for this very timely presentation and topic. But I need clarification to two questions or two areas. One, you made a comment about the pandemic 2020 creating a new stakeholder for firms or organizations. Yeah. I need clarification after that. Maybe, for instance, you can give I need some clarification, maybe an example of the stakeholders and how the pandemic is actually creating new stakeholders for firms. Okay. Then also, I need also clarification concerning operational and other policies. For example, the HR policy, the marketing policy, the finance policies, production policies, and the R&D policies. So I don't know, because I'm thinking that they are the same, but I need clarification to, as in the difference between these policies. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chijoke. Because I'm a practitioner, I am always looking at the field, looking at the environment, the actual thing that is happening in the environment. When we return back from the pandemic, The number one thing, for instance, that the GAP noticed is that we are now asked to have the most local government people, that is the community government in our area of operation. We were asked to go and register in the Ministry of Environment with them. And then that registration was for us to say that we have accepted that they are going to be coming to our premises to check the healthy and the pandemic protocol conditions of our company for them to be able to allow us to operate. Prior to 2020, we did not have any business with the local government Minister of Environment. But immediately we came back. In fact, at a point, there was a day they came and they shut us down. That is where our sales center is. They shut us down and they told us that in this particular date, we are not supposed to run beyond 3 p.m. in the evening. So since that time, till as I'm speaking with you, every week they come for that monitoring visit to check whether we still have our washing hand point in front of our office, whether we have our sanitizers, whether our cash office is not receiving more than one person because we don't have a large office there, whether we are allowing people that is not wearing a face mask to be coming into our offices, whether we placed our sign. This is Ministry of Environment. It's not even Ministry of Health. And when I launched the complaint in our association platform, they say yes, that they have been mandated by the state government to be going, because it will cost them a lot to be going from the central government to be going to businesses wherever the businesses are, that they are closer to the business addresses, that they should be going to do the checks on behalf of the state government. So from the time we returned, which is in May 2020, that Ministry of Environment, the local government Ministry of Environment, has become our stakeholder. So that's just an example of what we have experienced. And it's not just to the GAP group alone. A whole lot of other people is also having, for those who have large corporations like Dangote, of course, the people that are producing, manufacturing preventive health materials are now their stakeholder, because every single month they are expected to change maybe face masks. They are expected to share another one, because as a business organization, they are not expecting you that your staff will come and be buying sanitizers, buying face masks, buying all the things that they need to ensure that they are safe in the premises of your company. So this is what I meant when I said that COVID-19 has created, new stakeholders for business organization. Not just that, it has also delisted some stakeholders from, from business organizations. Of course, there is the line of product that we have already canceled, but it wasn't as a result of the pandemic. It was a result of a policy of Lagos state government in Nigeria.
Thank you.
Okay. I think
Thank you.
I've explained that.
Yes, Sasha. Yes, Sasha, as we try to wrap up, anyone else with a comment, can you please show by raising your hand?
I don't know. Sorry, Dr. Justin. I want to thank her for the beautiful answer to the question, but she only addressed one.
That's true.
So it's supposed to be the second one, please.
Okay. All right. The operational policies, why policy technocrats in organizations focus on operational policy is because it is like the umbrella body of every other policies in an organization. Operational policy will let you know whether the company needs a finance policy department, or whether a company needs, a HR policy. It will state everything under that operational policy. And why it is very, very important is that the operational policy will define what exactly is the HR head going to do. What is it that when HR comes into the office? Am I off also?
It's fine. We can hear you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
You can hear me fine. What is it that for instance, the HR team does in the morning? It is beyond job or responsibility profiling or documentation. It will say everything about who the HR is going to be, whether it's going to be a male or a female, It's going to say, when is he going to be employed? Do we need only one HR or we need two? It's going to say, what will HRA be doing? What will HRB be doing? So operational policy is the body, is the umbrella policy of business organizations. Every other policies in the organization derives, their focus from the operational policies. That is why when you go to the banking sector, the only thing you see banks flaunt is their operational policy. You don't used to hear anything about HR, finance, because it is the operational policy they project so much. Because of course, it is the operational policy that links business organizations to their customers. And it is operational policies that gives the public the perception of who you are and how you deliver your goods and services.
Thank you. We ignite conversations, and apologies for taking too long to close this session. I see Mr. Osho wants to comment, then Sasha will comment last, then I'll close and give up to Jane. If there is anyone else, please raise your hand as we try to capture everyone's insights. Mr. Osho.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good day, everyone. And this is Samuel Osho from Nigeria. I would like to add that to drive policies, one has to be politically aware, because, policy is derived, or let me say, comes from a root word that comes from politics as well. So politics and policies, they go hand in hand. If you're implementing a policy and you are not carrying people along, there is no way the policy can have any effect. And most often than not, we see that entrepreneurs, they find it so hard to stick to policies. It's very, very difficult for entrepreneurs, one-man businesses, so to speak, in African parlance. They find it very, very hard to stick to policies. And this has been the bane of them not being able to sustain their businesses. Even those that are sustaining their businesses, they usually have high staff turnover. The last place I worked as a paid employee, there has been this issue of people leaving the company within 6 months of joining, within 4 months of joining. And, some even leave 2 months, 3 months after joining the organization. I got to find out actually what happened, because the person at the helm of affairs actually looks at people from her own perspective. She works based on emotions most of the time, despite being a leadership development expert and all that. A woman, but she makes things so difficult, makes aunties out of nothing, and all those stuff actually culminated in my exit from the company. Even though I didn't want to leave, but I had to just leave. And after I left, I discovered that 2 of my former colleagues, even 3, the person that replaced me also left 6 months after she joined. The person I also met there, she didn't spend up to 2 years, she had also left. And another person that I also met there, she didn't spend up to 1.5 years, she had also left. So these are issues that really should have been handled if there were to be a policy in place, and the person at the helm of affairs knows what it takes to actually stand and live by those policies, so as to be able to build a sustainable organization. So I think that the question of leadership and being able to be politically aware, being aware of what goes on within the organization, making sure that everyone is found equitable before the policies that are implemented, goes a long way. So these are my own contributions. I believe that leadership and politics, playing the politics right, will always play a very huge role in making policies stand the test of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sasha, can you answer the question and then you give your closing remarks as well from your end?
Yeah, so the question was asked that what is the link between operational policy and processes as well as practices, or say culture? And I think Maureen has already kind of talked about the link between operational policies and process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the link between culture. So culture is the ambiguous concept of kind of everything you want your organization to be, but it doesn't have a lot of fine concrete things to kind of document what your culture is, besides when you talk about values and vision. The way that I see operational policy linking the two is operational policy, when you create strong alignment with your culture, is the way that you can clearly dictate how that culture is going to play out in practice and create concrete processes that will exemplify your culture. So when you want to have your culture, basically you want to ensure your culture isn't aligned with your operational policy, because your operational policy is actually what you're doing in your organization. And if that is not aligned, then your culture doesn't really mean that much, essentially. To try to make it very brief. It's a much more complex conversation. My closeout to this is, I really loved this conversation. I loved all of the different perspectives that everybody has had. And I think these two topics really do meld very strongly together in terms of talking about collaboration and diversity and how important that is for an organization, but then we're talking about the struggles of how hard it is to get organizations to really do that. And then with Maureen's talk, she talks about operational policies, and these are really places where you can create concrete ways and really work through the processes of how to do this within your organization. And this is where you can embed collaborative practices and processes in the procedures that come out of the operational policy. And I think they really become hand in hand. And as she said, that's where you can embed in the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the organizational business. And then I think the really major difficulty that we all talked about is how important leadership is here, and how if leaders are not on board with this, then they can abuse all of these different policies. They can say that they support something while behaving in ways that are contradictory to it. So we've kind of been talking about it, but the idea is that leadership development is crucial to do first, and to focus on that and make sure that you are developing the leaders to a stage where they can support any of these processes that we've been talking about, whether it's collaboration or actually developing effective operational policies that they really are going to implement and aren't going to be just serving to reinforce their current position in power, but actually serving to help the organization achieve their goals. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. And Mrs. Maureen, there are two questions I need you to close with, and then you give your remarks. Yes.
Yeah, someone says, when organizations focus on making more and employ one person to do a job of 5 persons, how will they have operational policy facilitator? When organizations focus on making more money and employing one person to do a job of 5 people, how will they have operational policy facilitator? Okay, thank you. This is a very good question from Jamike Okoroji. Jamike, this is what operational policy is trying to avoid. This is what is trying to eliminate in the system. If, for instance, a company is having a culture of inquiries and asking for the opinion of an employee before assigning duty, which is part of what operational policy would have defined, there is no how that particular employee will take the job of 5 persons, because before that assignment is given, he would have been asked, what is your capacity? What can you take? Because this is what we are trying to say here. For people to begin to take operational policies very serious, what is on document must be reflected on the physical activities in your business organization. If your operational policies say that, for instance, Jamike is going to be coming up in the morning and is going to go to 3 locations, come back to the office, put up certain documents and close. Is Jamike doing exactly what that document says? So because the operational policy of a company is not allowing a leader of an organization to give a duty that 5 people is doing to one single person. So it is because of the time we do not have, otherwise we would have done something about implementation, because there are stages of implementation and there are implementation indicators. There are indicators that reveals if a company is actually committed to their operational policy or if they are not committed. And the labor law empowers employees to protest if they realize that the company is not facing, they are not, because operational policies is part of the constitution of the operation of the organization. So if a company puts it on document, hand it over to you, and they are not, they are not following it, it means they are flouting the rules, the procedures, and the regulations of the operations of that organization, and then the employees have the right to protest. But when the organization do not have structure, like what Samuel Osho have just reviewed, Samuel have just given us example of many businesses in Africa. That is even how the GAP group started. It was a one-man business before. It's now, grow, because we were listening to what people were, recommendations from experts. We were having an ambition to grow. If it is a business that does not have structure, it is very, very difficult, because decision-making is just concentrated on one person. And that is not how organizations should be run. Organizations should have a structure. When the organization do not have structure, abuse becomes an everyday part of life of that business. And of course, you have already said it. The woman I do believe that she is not a serious entrepreneur. She do not have ambition for expanding and probably going into international market. And if she's running at that level and she do not want to open up the windows for people to come into her company, collaborate with her efforts, and then grow the company, just like you said, the company is going to fold up. So you don't worry yourself. You keep having a high turnover of employees, and that's not a good sign in any business organization.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This confirms our commitment to the mission and the need for us to have more of these conversations. And I will throw that back to Maureen and probably Jane to arrange another session with Sasha. We also need to give Sasha an exposure outside of the US in terms of the work that she's doing. And the Afghanistan team has arranged another session for Professor Jamieson and Dr. Christine in January as a way to cross-collaborate across continents, across nations. So if possible, we can have a session with under the GAP groups, or Jane can also arrange something in Kenya as we try to collaborate and have lasting relationships and give exposure to Sasha. I understand, I know her work. I followed her for a long time regarding what she's doing. So we need that exposure. And I saw Mavis joined us. If you can search her, I know she's involved in a lot of training and development in South Africa. We would need to have more collaborations and give exposure and have more of these conversations more often. And I will hand over to Jane to give the closing remarks and probably ask Mavis, who has joined us for the first time, to close today's session on our behalf. Jane.
Thank you, Doc. You've just read my mind. I was about to say that we might need another session with Sasha. Well, today's session is a real reflection of what you always say, igniting insightful conversation. It's only time that has limited us today. If you had more time, I'm sure Ms. Maureen will also unpack her package today. So thank you all to the speakers today, Sasha and Ms. Maureen. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I believe we'll leave here full of knowledge, and my only hope is that we are not just attending, but you're going to try and apply it in our daily lives. We are Organization Leadership Development Network. Thank you all. That's all for me.
Thank you.
Ms. Jane. You've done very well.
Thank you,
Thank you. It's good to have me. I'm going to connect with you after this conversation.
Yes,
oh,
Mavis. Mavis, this was your first time to join us here, and we would ask you to close today's session on our behalf. Your comments, and then you close for us.
Oh, wow, thank you for such an honor. Maureen, thank you for your presentation. I'm sure there were other presentations before I came through, but I listened to yours. And so I really appreciate you sharing, especially on operational policy, because as I was reflecting and thinking about leadership development, you really nailed it to say, it's the operational policy. If you don't have operational policies, then you will not have a process. So as we talk about leadership development gaps, one of the things we know is if there's no process, your process doesn't speak to what you ought to do in terms of leadership development, which is what we often see in our organizations. Even when we talk about culture, people will tell you that if it's not incorporated in your policies, it's a fallacy. So as you spoke about operational policy, it just kind of, for me, made sense to say, you know what? So here is where the link is. So if your operational policies are not creating the processes policies that will probably provide the results you want,
Yeah.
then the gap is actually there. So you need to start right there in terms of, if we are developing leaders, this is the policy on leadership development. If we are building culture, this is our policy on culture, and then that enables you to then create the processes that will facilitate the results you're trying to create. So thank you so much for that sharing. Even though I came in a little late, I did learn that, and I'll reflect on that going forward. I hope to be part of these conversations going forward, so I can also learn, but also probably share my own input. So thank you guys, thank you everybody who's on the call for your insights and for just sharing this professional cross-pollination, so that we can continue to grow in our sort of development journeys in the OD field. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Justin, for the opportunity and for pulling us together to focus on what is really important for the African continent's development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. See you on the 12th of December as we close the year with a discussion on spirituality in OD, leadership and governance. And we are going to have perspective from the Christian point of view and the Islam point of view as we demonstrate our commitment to diversity and inclusion as a value in the fields that we represent. So we hope to see you for that conversation as we end our OLDN calendar on the 12th of December 2020. Thank you so much, Sasha, for hitting the call. We are going to ensure that we have more conversations with you in different countries that we are represented as we try to deepen new paradigms in OD leadership and governance. Much appreciation for your time. Apologies for the 1 hour extension. It indicates the insightful conversation that we have had. Thank you once again.